1978, Honda rolled a sculpture into showrooms, 6 cylinders swinging in the breeze, 24 valves under twin cams, 6 carburetors glittering like organ pipes. The CBX1000 was built as a statement and lived like a dare. The truth behind its deadly reputation isn't scandal or myth, it's simple physics. A magnificent engine asking everything from the machine that carried it, and sometimes more than the era could give. The brief, a 6 to change the conversation. Honda invented the modern multi with the CB750, but by the late 1970s, the Superbike aisle belonged to lighter, calmer fours that made speed look easy. To reclaim the emotional high ground, Honda authorized an unapologetic holo, a road-going echo of its Grand Prix 6s. Shoichiro Irimajiri, the architect behind the jewel-like RC 165/166 era, set the tone. The goal wasn't merely to post a lap time, it was to make the engine itself the spectacle. Honda evaluated a brutally effective 4, yet chose 6 because 6 promised what no competitor could: turbine smoothness, high RPM song, and a silhouette that said, "Racing at idle." Marketing wouldn't need a slogan. A startup blip would do the talking. In that climate, the CBX1000 landed like a thunderclap. Its figures, displacement just over a liter, peak power north of 100 horses, quarter-mile runs in the low 11s, made headlines. The more revealing choice was packaging. Instead of hiding the engine, Honda treated it as architecture. The bike's visual center was the motor, not paint or plastics. And because the brief put feel as high as force, the CBX was tuned to be elastic and theatrical, trading a little thrust for linearity and tone, compared with a drag strip special. The commercial brief hit a cultural one too. After a decade proving bulletproof reliability, Honda wanted theater that still felt like Honda. Precision, not temper. A6 let engineers showcase tolerance control, surface finish, and airflow discipline in ways a Big 4 could not. Even the way the engine filled the frame rails was part of the pitch. The CBX looked intentional from any angle, with no side covers wide enough to hide shortcuts. Riders raised on twins, and 4s stood in showrooms and listened. The CBX didn't ask for imagination. It supplied it on the starter button. Inside the CBX, architecture with intent. The 1047cc inline 6 is over square at 64.5 by 53.4 millimeters. 2 chain-driven overhead camshafts operate 4 valves per cylinder via inverted buckets. 6 28mm Keihin carburetors sit close to the ports in an inward canted rack to shorten runners and keep the airflow calm. Compression hovers in the low 9s. Ignition is transistorized. Power drives through a 5-speed gearbox and high-vo primary to a wet clutch. Claimed peak arrives near 9,000 RPM, but what defines the CBX1000 isn't the number. It's how the engine climbs there, without lump or protest, almost electric in the way vibration recedes as revs rise. Look harder, and the showy width turns clever. To narrow the lower cases, Honda stacked the alternator and ignition hardware behind the cylinders, instead of hanging them off the sides. The crank's long, rigid beam is supported closely. Drive is taken from the center to reduce torsion. Oil circulation is generous, and the sump shallow enough to keep the engine low in the frame. The result at the rider's knees is surprisingly compact. Service logic was baked in. Access covers make shim checks possible with basic tools. The car bank unbolts as one, and the whole assembly is friendlier on a bench than folklore suggests. Yet honesty matters. 6 of everything multiplies effort. Valve clearance work means measuring 24 gaps, and shim undercam architecture makes any adjustment an unhurried job. Carb synchronization is straightforward in procedure and demanding in patience. The CBX doesn't punish skill, it demands it and pays it back at the twist of a wrist. Inline 6s carry natural primary and secondary balance. The CBX leans into that advantage. The crank can spin with less counterweight than a Big 4 for the same smoothness, and the firing cadence keeps the torque trace-free of deep troughs. That smooth delivery is why the CBX's throttle can be metered in millimeters in the mid-range without jolting the chassis, and why long days feel shorter than the stopwatch says. The payoff to packaging is just as real. With the alternator nested aft and ancillaries tucked tight, the outer width that meets the wind is dominated by headers rather than cases. Cooling fins run deep and straight to harvest every slip of air. Combustion, flow, and the soundtrack. The CBX's personality starts at its ports. Modest valve angles and compact chambers encourage efficient burn at road-going compression, while relatively conservative cam timing preserves mid-range without choking the top end. With 6 small cylinders, the intake pulses are numerous and closely spaced, so the carburetors see a steadier signal than an aggressive 4. That steadiness is why fueling can be set clean, yet rich enough to keep the engine cool when ridden hard. Exhaust is where philosophy becomes theater. The stock 6-into-2 system blends civility with flow, broadening the curve and muting boom at cruise. Period 6-into-6 and 6-into-1 options trade shape. The former sharpens the treble and dramatizes overrun. The latter tucks weight and can wake the mid-range at the cost of some velvet. The CBX is defined by an Order 6 serenade that climbs from silk to siren between 5 and 9,000 RPM. Its smooth harmonic stack reduces rider fatigue, and the throttle's first quarter turn is so predictable that big speed arrives without theatrics, until the last quarter turn, when the air-cooled 6's lungs finally demand respect. Heat management is the quiet constraint. Air cooling and close-packed cylinders mean tuned airflow matters at low speeds and during shop procedures. Seasoned hands set large fans in front of the headers before prolonged synchronization or leak-down work. It isn't fragility. It's physics. Keep the breeze moving, and the CBX behaves like the best-mannered thoroughbred you'll ever season for the street. Carburation rewards method more than magic, because each cylinder's appetite is small. Float heights and pilot circuits must agree very closely. A lazy bowl or dragging choke plunger on even one carburetor can blur the signature smoothness. Tuners chasing perfection start by restoring stock baselines, needle position, main and pilot sizes, then work in tiny increments and test with steady-state runs rather than whacking the throttle. Get it right and you find that uncanny CBX glide, a big bike surge that feels like an electric motor breathing. Cam timing speaks the same language. Lift and duration are assertive for the era, but not frantic. Overlap is restrained, so the idle sits steady and cold starts behave if the battery is honest. The combustion chamber's compact shape and centrally located plugs encourage fast burn, allowing modest advance without detonation on quality fuel. It's conservative race logic translated to a road rhythm. Numbers on paper, loads in the real world. Contemporary road tests logged quarter miles in the low 11s and top-end figures in the mid-130-50s emp. Those aren't abstractions. They're loads the rest of the machine has to digest. Early CBXs carried 35mm fork tubes, twin shocks, a tubular frame that enlisted the engine as a stressed partner, and Comstar wheels on period rubber. Together, they delivered a ride that was composed in a straight line and animated at high speed on imperfect surfaces. Testers recorded a hint of weave near the top of 5th on big, fast sweepers, and noted that braking deep into bumpy corners could ask more of the fork than its bushings could answer. None of that made the Honda unrideable. It simply meant the engine could ask harder questions than the chassis always answered. Set the CBX beside its peers, and the picture sharpens. Suzuki's GS1000 and Yamaha's XS1100 often felt calmer on bad pavement. Kawasaki's Z1R carried less mass, yet none offered the CBX's turbine rush or its megaphone voice. Buyers who lived for lap times and lightness drifted to the simpler 4s. Riders who wanted a daily opera bought the 6 and learned its limits the respectful way. Give it space to run straight and brake with foresight. Deadly, here is the reminder that physics pays cash. Tires and geometry explain most of the reputation. Bias-ply construction, period compounds, and relatively narrow profiles worked acceptably within 70s speeds. The CBX simply asked for more. Steering head angles and trail that felt friendly at 60 miles per hour could feel busy beyond 120. Braking hardware that impressed on paper ran hot when hauling a 600-pound wet bike down from triple digits, repeatedly. Magazines of the day learned to ride the CBX like a fast sport tourer. Set your line early, keep inputs smooth, and let the engine do the heavy lifting between corners. Do that, and the big Honda felt imperial. Ride it like a lightweight 4, and it reminded you which part was there for the show. Course corrections, CBX, through its model years. Honda listened. The 1979 and 1980 machines, often called Z and A, hewed to the original brief. Twin shocks, 35mm forks, and the full engine as jewelry display. Emissions and drivability tweaks on later A-specs shaved a handful of peak horses while improving manners. For 1981, the B model pivoted towards sport touring with a Pro-Link monoshock rear, 39mm air-assisted forks, stronger frame members, ventilated front rotors, and a full fairing with optional luggage. Claimed output hovered near 100 horsepower, but curb weights climbed with equipment, acceleration softened, and stability rose. For 1982, the C model refined details while carrying the touring brief forward. Seen as a strategy, the evolution made sense. Riders who loved the engine also wanted distance, protection, and predictability. Rather than chasing more power from an air-cooled architecture already making headlines, Honda bolted confidence around it. The market nonetheless voted with wallets. Lighter, cheaper fours, often including Honda's own stablemates, sold in greater numbers. The CBX's role shifted from volume leader to rolling flagship, a benchmark that said more about what Honda could do than about what most riders would buy twice. The fairing on later models did more than shield riders. It stabilized pressure around the carb inlets in crosswinds and rain, kept heat off knees on long days, and created a calmer pocket at cruising speeds where the 6 likes to lope. Pro-Link rear suspension separated spring and damping work, slowing the pitch and heave cycle that could unsettle early bikes on rippled pavement. Air assistance on the 39mm fork let owners trim stance for cargo or passengers. Small changes that added up to a machine that behaved more like a grand tourer with a superbike's voice. Living with the 6, procedures that keep it honest. The CBX rewards method. Valve clearance checks require patience. Measure 24 clearances cold. Compare with specification. And, if adjustments are needed, remove the cams to swap shims in matched pairs. A logbook isn't optional, it's part of the toolkit. Carburetor synchronization is a matter of sequence and temperature. Back off mixtures to baseline, equalize butterflies with gauges, set idle, then repeat with fans running so heat soak doesn't drift the results. Minor vacuum leaks a 4 might ignore. A 6 will report as a faint hiss or an indifferent idle. Electrical prudence pays. Early charging systems work when every connection is clean and the regulator rectifier is healthy. Owners treat upgraded units and refreshed connectors as preventative medicine. Fuel systems deserve similar respect. A sticky float or a petcock that doesn't seal can let gravity fill a cylinder, crank against a liquid, and rods bow. The fix is simple habit. Shut the fuel, listen for wayside smells, and if anything seems off, pull the plugs and spin the engine before lighting it. Most important, remember, the engine wants clean air and oil. Filters, plugs, and fresh oil don't add glamour to a spec sheet, but they're the quiet side of the CBX's reputation. Do the ordinary work on time, and the extraordinary character stays extraordinary. Storage habits matter. Parked for weeks, shut the petcock, run the bowls low, and use stabilizer if fuel will sit. Varnish turns 6 idle circuits into a weekend lost to cleaning. Spark plug access is reasonable once the tank and airbox are out. Use the correct heat range and torque, because the aluminium head repays gentle threads with a lifetime of service. Oil choice is simple. Quality detergent oil in the weight your climate justifies. Changed on schedule. Clutch feel improves with a correctly adjusted and routed cable. The gearbox is Honda typical, happiest when shifted with a decisive toe rather than a lazy nudge. None of these steps are exotic. They're the rituals that turn a big number on a side cover into a willing partner. Second acts: frames, upgrades, and the engine set free. Because the engine is the point, modern builders design forward from it. Aftermarket frames in the Moto Martin idiom, contemporary upside-down forks, radial forepots, and lighter wheels recast the CBX as the bike its motor always implied. Drop unsprung mass, add stiffness where the original flexed, and the 6's elasticity turns from burden to advantage, letting throttle steer without drama. Riders who prefer a stock silhouette work invisible magic instead. Fork internals, shock valving, modern tires, and subtle geometry tweaks that leave the look intact while trimming the edges. Exhaust choices follow taste and use. A 6x2 for range and civility, a 6x1 for mid-range urgency, or a 6x6 for sheer pageantry when the mood calls. The market has caught up with the idea. Early naked bikes in original paint can command a premium. Later, Tourers trade on condition and completeness. Documentation matters, as does evidence of careful electrical and fuel work. Projects sell to optimists. Finished machines sell to believers. In each case, the story buyers are really purchasing is the same one Honda wanted to tell in 1978. This is not a motorcycle that hides its heart. It wears the engine on the outside and invites you to listen. Engine rebuilds follow the same logic as maintenance. Careful measurement beats guesswork. Timing chains, guides, and tensioners deserve fresh life when the top end is open. Valve stem seals cure smoky habits that jets cannot. Blueprinting rod and main clearances restores that velvety crank feel, and dynamic balancing pays dividends you can hear. Some owners add electronic ignition modules for more stable spark under electrical load, an upgrade that modernizes behavior without touching the carburetor's analog charm. The aesthetic question, how much to change, has many right answers. Some riders keep the candy paint and chrome and hide the work in bushings and oil. Others lean into the motor's futurism with bare metal frames and sculptural exhausts. Either way, the rule holds: make the bicycle honest, and the engine will make the case for itself. Death by bandwidth, immortality by noise. No recall ended the CBX. No ban killed it. Its danger was the honest kind that appears when an engine outgrows the bicycle wrapped around it. Honda built a magnificent power plant and bolted a good, not great, late 1970s chassis beneath it. Riders discovered the gap and rode within it, or past it. That is the shocking truth behind deadly, a mismatch revealed by speed. What endures is the motor, compact in plan, extravagant in sensation, deftly packaged, and mechanically eloquent. The CBX's 6 remains one of the clearest statements a manufacturer ever made about what it values. Treat it with procedure, and it treats you with music. Respect heat, and it returns distance. Tame the bicycle, and the engine gives you everything. The CBX did not need a scandal to be risky. It needed only a right wrist, a long road, and a rider willing to listen past the flame to the rhythm that made it unforgettable. If there is a single sentence to carry into any CBX build or ride plan, it is this: the engine is the promise. Your job is to make the promise livable. Do that with geometry, service, and measured inputs, and the Honda answers with an experience that still feels singular more than 4 decades on. The noise is famous, but the engineering is the part that lasts.